Hi everyone, welcome to another Experimenta. My name is Allison Irvine, and this week we will be talking with ISF Artist in Resident Robert Fathauer on topics including mathematics, fractals, and art. Just one reminder before we begin, we have a link on the event page to this Experimenta to a CrowdRise link. If you click on it, any types of donations are very welcome, so thank you. Robert, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So just to get started, what's your educational background and kind of how did you get started in this type of artistic work?
Yeah, I think, in high school I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life. I knew I liked science, especially physics. I liked art and music. So I decided to major in physics, and going through that, actually my freshman year in college I had a really great calculus teacher named Herb Greenman, and he's the one who got me turned on to math really. Ended up double majoring in physics and math in college. Went on to graduate school at Cornell and started in applied physics and switched to electrical engineering. But my work was really more material sciencey, so I was working on a technique where you grew thin single layers of crystalline material on crystalline substrates. And I think the crystallography kind of got me interested in tiling, because a crystal lattice is really a tiling in three-dimensional space. And so that kind of steered me in that direction. So I think things evolved from there. My interest in M.C. Escher's artwork was a big factor, and a big influence. I started doing my own Escher-like prints at some point, and things kind of took off from there.
Yeah. For those of you who don't know, can you explain a bit about what tessellations and like fractals are? Maybe just like a quick definition.
Yeah, a tessellation is just a collection of shapes that fit together without gaps or overlaps to cover the mathematical plane. So it's another word for tiling, and a tiling of a floor is a tessellation. And a fractal is a little bit more difficult to conceptualize, but it's something that exhibits self-similarity on different scales. So if you zoom in, each time you zoom in, you'll see something similar to what you saw before you zoomed in.
Okay, interesting. And you started with those, doing those with hand drawing, and then kind of went over to computer graphics. Is that right? What kind of made you do the switch to computers?
The tessellation stuff, I really started using a computer, but not really programming, just using a general drawing program. I used freehand, similar to Illustrator, just to kind of design things. I wanted to print them by hand, kind of taking Escher as my guide there. Escher was really into woodcuts. And so I did took a class in block printing, did a couple of lino cuts and woodcuts, then started doing screen prints. Woodcuts are pretty tedious. At some point, though, my interest drifted more into fractals. And fractals, because of their nature, have very fine structure, very small details, which is a problem with a hand printing technique. So that's when I started doing kind of finished digital prints on the computer to realize that kind of detail I wanted in fractal designs.
And how do you feel like your degree in physics and electrical engineering, do you feel like it's impacted your work at all, or steered you in a direction that you didn't think you would go?
I think there's the crystallography connection I mentioned already, but I think it was more learning how to approach problem solving from a scientific perspective, learning how to kind of do original work and to talk about that and write papers about that. And so my artistic career has combined original work in what I call recreational mathematics. So I try to use mathematics to come up with new types of designs or structures that haven't been done before. I think that's my advantage as an artist, is my ability to to use math basically in designs.
Mm-hmm. And how do you feel like the mathematic or scientific community felt about your work? Like, do you feel like it was kind of hard for you to combine those two mediums, or do you feel like it just kind of came naturally to you because of your interests?
I think mathematicians have been very receptive to my work. There are a lot of mathematicians who are kind of turned on to math and art now. That wasn't as true, I think, 20 years or so ago. But in that intervening time, there have been some conferences related to math and art. One annual conference is Bridges, specifically on math and art. And there have been art exhibitions at the Bridges conference, and also each year at the Joint Mathematics meetings, which is a big national meeting in the U.S. for mathematicians, like 6,000, mostly university professors. And I've taken a lead role, actually, in putting on art exhibits at that conference. And the conference organizers have really been supportive. And I think it's exposed more mathematicians to art. And it's increased awareness, certainly among mathematicians, as to the ties possible with art. The science is a little bit off to the side. For me, I'm not, going to science conferences on a regular basis. Certainly scientists love mathematics, understand mathematics. There are aspects of math that most scientists probably don't know a lot about that tie in strongly into art, such as polyhedra, fractals maybe, or tessellations aren't so much the kind of math that most scientists would use.
Right. And you also created a company called Tesselations, and that kind of incorporated your own designs with like puzzles and like also some educational tools. How did that kind of come to be?
Yeah, that kind of evolved organically, I guess. I don't know. I started doing Escher-like prints, as I mentioned. That was about 20 years ago, a little more than 20 now, I guess. Yeah. And I thought, well, I'll show these at art fairs, wait for people to see them. And then I thought I'd get more sales, more interest if I had a puzzle or two to go along with them. And so I designed a puzzle called Squids and Rays based on one of my tessellation designs. And that was like 1993, I guess I designed that puzzle. And when I showed my art and the puzzle at a few art fairs, I found out that teachers, especially math teachers, really liked the puzzle. And so I thought, well, I'll do a math teacher conference. So I exhibited at the National Math Teachers Meeting. We got a really positive response. So I kind of moved in that direction due to the response I got from people. Mm-hmm. And I think over time, well, the initial emphasis on my business was on puzzles. And for a while, I was kind of active in the toy market and showing at Toy Fair in New York and that kind of stuff. But at some point, I decided the educational market really made more sense. And in recent years, I've had more educational products like some books, some hands-on, like trigonometry and geometry sets, things like that.
Okay, cool. Yeah, if you haven't looked at it, we have a link to Robert's website. It's really great. You should check it out. Maybe, Robert, do you want to maybe show some of your own work? Maybe just something that you've been working on lately, or that would be great.
Sure. Let me go to the screen sharing mode here. Hold on. I'll first maybe talk a little bit about different websites. Mm-hmm. I do have my art website, which is simply robertfathauer.com, and and there's different topics on that. Maybe I'll come back to that in a minute. But let me first mention my company website, tessellations.com, talks about our products, and so there's different puzzles we have, books, whatever, classroom posters, math, hands-on math sets. So that's also there. My recreational mathematics you can get at through this page if you click on the fractal tiling links I have a website on fractal tiling, so that's combining tessellations and fractals. And there's a variety of those that I found, and talk about how to design those and whatever. So you can explore that.
Yeah.
There's some kind of fun geometry in that. Also, more recently than that, I've done some work with fractal knots, and there's a similar fractal knots website. I should say a knot, to a mathematician, is a curve in three-dimensional space. It's a single line that's unbroken that has crossings, basically, that can't be untied. And you can take knots and do fractal designs based on knots. And maybe an example of one of those. Finally, just going through websites, just starting in the last few months, I've designed in collaboration with Henry Segerman some new polyhedral dice, and I've started a little dice effort called the Dice Lab. So that's something new you can check out too if you're into polyhedra and dice and gaming. So let's see. Go back to my art pages. So tessellations is kind of the first stuff I was getting into. You can break in any time with questions. I'm just talking.
Sure.
You can break in, I'll keep talking. So feel free to ask any questions.
No problem.
So a more Escher-like tessellation would be something like this. You know, Escher was famous for doing like tessellations in which the individual tiles are fish or birds or even people. And then a tessellation that also has fractal character might be something like this bats and owls design, where the motifs get smaller and smaller as you approach the edge of the design. And in theory, the design has kind of an infinite level of detail to it.
Right.
So I guess from tessellations to fractals, I kind of moved more into some work that was strictly fractal in nature. You know, for example, this is a design based on a fractal curve, and there's high resolution in that. So you'll see similar sorts of curve structures of different scales in this kind of design.
Mm-hmm.
And a few years ago, I guess my main thrust artistically was looking at fractal trees. You know, fractal tree is a mathematical thing where you have little lines that branch off and form a tree-like structure. Mm-hmm. So here's an example of a graphical kind of fractal tree. You see the same entire tree all over different little copies of the thing. Right. That's kind of the idea of a fractal. But then they had the idea of using photographic imagery to make fractals. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, you mentioned on your website that you're kind of very into hiking and like the outdoors. Has nature kind of inspired these fractal trees, or is this something that's kind of entirely different?
Yeah, it definitely ties into nature. I think artists, you know, draw their inspiration from nature, and science is about understanding nature, and mathematics describes nature. You know, the physical world is described by laws that are mathematical, like, you know, the gravitational attraction varies as the inverse square of the separation of two bodies and that kind of thing. So I think mathematics is manifest in nature, and especially fractals. Things like fractal trees, mountains have fractal character, clouds have fractal character. So it was kind of drawing on that, and I think to me hiking is a way to be in touch with nature and to draw inspiration from nature. I think nature teaches us good composition. This is a case where there's a fractal tree made up of there's a building block about this big, and this is actually the skeleton of a cholla cactus. So this is a cactus that grows here in Arizona. When they die, This is a part that lasts a long time. And I kind of made a weird fractal tree out of this. Looks nothing like a cactus itself, but it's kind of taking that as a starting point or inspiration. And I also draw inspiration, I think, from rock formations in nature. I like slot canyons. They're, they kind of surround you with rock walls. If you've ever walked through a Richard Serra sculpture, these giant rolled steel things, you can walk through kind of channels of them. For example, in the museum in Bilbao, the Guggenheim Museum there in Spain. They're kind of like that, but these are kind of more interesting because there's all sorts of curves, there's subtle colors in the sandstone. And there's some really fine examples of slot canyons in northern Arizona and southern Utah, so that's pretty accessible to me.
Yeah.
These are shots from Antelope Canyon, which is a very well-known slot canyon on the Navajo Reservation.
Wow.
So I think those are a real source of beauty and sculptural inspiration. This is Buckskin Gulch.
Oh, wow.
And I'm kind of a person that likes being quietly in tune with nature, so I think hiking in the desert resonates with my personality too. But this is an area called White Pocket, pretty close to Buckskin Gulch. It's not a slot canyon, but still a very beautiful kind of swirling sandstone features.
Right. You mentioned that you were like somewhat different from other fractal artists. Can you kind of expand upon that a bit?
Yeah, let me try to get my face back here.
Sure.
Okay. Well, most fractal art is done using software designed for that purpose, and it's basically using equation-based fractals. So the Mandelbrot set is probably the main example. Benoit Mandelbrot basically recognized fractals and popularized fractals as a form of geometry, and this particular equation that's used to generate what's called the Mandelbrot set, and that set has incredible detail and fine structure, ties into the Julia set. And so most people that do fractal art are using those, that mathematics and software that uses that mathematics as a basis for creating fractal images. In contrast, my own fractal art is what I would call graphical fractal art, where I have an element like a little bit of a tree trunk, and I repeat that and scale it and reposition it and build up a fractal that way. So it's not the same technique that's usually used by a fractal artist. So I kind of avoid that label because the term fractal art has this kind of specific Mandelbrot set, Julia set kind of meaning to it.
Right. Interesting. Very cool. Well, they're beautiful. Was that your most recent work, or do you have something that you're kind of working on specifically right now?
Yeah, the last year or two, I've kind of taken the fractal tiling stuff into 3 dimensions instead of just leaving it as a flat plane. And that gets into something called hyperbolic geometry. I'll try to briefly describe that. We're taught Euclidean geometry in school. So like in a triangle, the angles add up to 180 degrees. But there's other geometries like spherical geometry where the angle in a triangle would be more than 180 degrees, or hyperbolic geometry where they're less than 180 degrees. So if you think about tiling, in hyperbolic tilings, you have kind of too many tiles coming together to lie flat, and so they rumple up and form 3-dimensional objects. And so I played around with fractal tiling, did some prints, I did some paper folding. I've actually got a few videos on YouTube on fractal paper folding. I could show one of those if you're interested.
Yeah, sure. That'd be great.
Let's see, let me go back to screen share mode here. Okay, so let me just show a 2-dimensional print of a fractal tiling. as a start. So something like this, where you have large tiles, and as you move outward, the tiles get smaller, but there's too much to kind of fit in the plane, so you get these ripply, chaotic effects, which can make very interesting, I think, organic curves. These are different views of the same thing. And you actually see this in nature. This looks a little bit like green leaf lettuce or kale. Those will be kind of ripply leaves you'll see in nature. So these are done in Mathematica, which is a math software package. But to do them in real life, I did some paper folding and made a couple of videos based on that paper folding. And these are on my YouTube page. And here's one example. So you start with a triangle. It has a 90-degree angle. This is actually a 3-4-5 triangle. And it folds up onto itself in a nice little pile. So it's just kind of fun to see what these things will do.
Yeah.
And if you continue this to more and more generations, you get more and more detail. So let's see. And there's a few of those on there.
Yeah, we can definitely put those links on the event page for people to go check out.
I'll just show one more of those. These are really short.
Sure, be great.
This is another triangle-based fractal tiling. So this, you start with an isosceles triangle. Those are the angles it has. And then it'll build up a few generations of the fractal. And when this folds like so, it forms a classical fractal known as the Koch snowflake or Koch curve. And kind of continuing on those lines, so that in last year, moving from fractal tilings, I've kind of gotten into hyperbolic fractal tilings, just hyperbolic surfaces. And I've done some clay sculpting using fractal curves and developing those fractal curves. And this is one example of that type of sculpture.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
So that I actually make a conscious effort to get away from the computer sometimes, because I think it's good to involve other senses in your art, like your hands, and whatever. And I think it's good not to be always kind of guided by the computer software you're using.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Sometimes it's difficult when kind of one medium works well with what you're trying to do, and to like branch out into something different. But those are beautiful.
Yeah, I think you always want to challenge yourself to do new stuff. Let me just show, this is my most recent clay sculpture. It's not even glazed yet. This is the same type of idea of a developing fractal curve, but trying to go more three-dimensional. And I think you can see a clear inspiration from nature in this. These obviously have some of a like brain coral or sea life kind of look to some of these things.
Yeah, I feel like branching out into different mediums as well kind of opens up the kind of base of people that you reach with your art. So I think that's great that you kind of mix up mediums.
Yeah, I think it's just fun too. I think it's good to try different things and to I think you grow and you do something new, and maybe you get new ideas working in a new medium, find out what it can do, and maybe new avenues open up.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, I think we might be kind of wrapping up, but do you have anything else you want to share in terms of your work or what you plan to work on? Or
I think right now my focus artistically is kind of working in clay and doing three-dimensional forms and trying to extend some of the ideas I've been playing with into 3 dimensions. I think sculpture is interesting because you know, you can walk around a sculpture and it looks different from different angles. It's a little bit more engaging, I think, than a two-dimensional piece of artwork. So that's kind of my current direction. And who knows where it'll be 5, 10 years from now. So, you know, I always seem to find surprises and unexpected things come up for me. So that's what makes it fun.
Yeah. With your company, are you still kind of working on educational tools for schools and different things like that, or is that something that's you're kind of not focusing on as much right now?
No, I try to do 2 or 3 new products every year, and I'm currently starting work on a new book about tessellations around the world. So as I've traveled, I've taken photographs of tessellations and nature and also man-made things, and I'm kind of collecting those into a book that's going to talk about tessellations, different tessellations, but also tying a little bit of geography and culture. And the idea is that kids will not only learn math, they'll also learn some geography and whatever at the same time. So that's one of my new products that will be done about the end of this year.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. Yeah, as somebody who struggled a bit with like math and geometry, I think it's great that you're using these visual tools to maybe reach more students, because I know that I definitely think in a visual way, and so it definitely helps to see those demonstrations and see the 3D artwork and everything. So I think that's a great cause, and it's kind of speaking to Imagine Sciences. What we're striving to do in terms of furthering science education through art. So thank you so much for sharing your work.
Well, thanks for having me. It's been fun.
Yeah, of course. And I just wanted to remind everyone again to go to the events page for this Experimenta, because there is a link to CrowdRise, and any donations we would be very grateful. So thank you. Thank you for joining us, Robert. I think we're gonna wrap up now, but thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.